market. Multi-residential market includes multi-residential farms, recreational properties, and land development. So let's talk about the multi-residential market. Multi-residential market technically refers to any residential structure with more than one dwelling unit. However, we will focus on the large residential units containing more than four units, including the marketing, the zoning, and construction. Let's look at there are two aspects to it: demand side and the supply side. On the demand side, the demand for multi-residential housing is a complex interplay of economics, demographic, and target market preferences. First, multi-residential projects must carefully assess overall economic conditions from a regional and local perspective. Expanding employment opportunities now translate into increased housing demands as individuals looking for work opportunities will search out housing within a particular locale. Similarly, rising income levels typically dictate potential price points for various types of multi-residential accommodation like studio, one, two, and three-bedroom apartments. Demographics also play a key role in migration or migration or overall population shift from one area to another. And the population growth provides useful indicators for the multi-residential markets. Investors also analyze changes in the formation rate and the size of household, as this helps determine the mix of unit sizes within a particular development. But closer analysis is often required as the demographical changes can be further broken down into bunch of subcategories. In terms of the supply side, the most productive approach to estimating supply side involves analyzing the existing competition as well as new residential buildings either currently owned, currently approved, or under construction. All buildings should be inventoried, including details such as the number of units, type of units, rent levels, condition of property, basic features, elevators or walk-ups, and additional amenities and locational features. Based on this information and demand-related data, the individual contemplating a multi-residential building can formulate a strategy for a new structure that will address the greatest demand within the general market or a specified sub-market, and also provide the best feature or amenity mix to attract that audience and establish competitive price points for various units. Now, coming on to the important aspect of the multi-residential market is the Residential Tenancies Act. The Residential Tenancies Act was it came out of a bunch of earlier regulations. The first was put in place with the passage of Premises Rent Review Act 1975. From 1975 to 1998, additional statutes and amendments came into existence. Unfortunately, these only serve to complicate the regulatory framework, resulting in a larger, unworkable clusters of state regulations. So, eventually, in June 1998, the Tenants Protection Act came into force. This overriding regulation governed all aspects of residential tenancies and greatly simplified procedures while retaining fundamental rent control provisions dating back over 2 decades. The Residential Tenancies Acts came in 2007 because of some concerns regarding the previous legislation being biased towards landlords and contained certain measures, particularly regarding landlords and tenant disputes that were widely unpopular with the various tenant groups. So that the impact of residential tenancy legislation cannot be underemphasized. It's a quite an important legislation, and successive government in Ontario have steadfastly maintained that such provisions are necessary rent controls and regulations not typically found in most other provinces. It's more of a economic reality. Coming on to the next aspect here is zoning. Zoning for a multi-residential is follows pretty much the same form as with the detached home. Now, the key restricted provisions include lot area minimum, lot frontage minimum, lot coverage minimum, overall height maximum, floor area minimum, front, side, and rear yard minimum, unit per hectare, parking allocations per unit, and landscaping minimum. So, residential zones are often delineated by ascending numbers like R1, R2, R3, to reflect increased density provisions, beginning with detached home followed by semi-detached and so on. And similarly, multi-residential zones have same are typically in the higher regions like R6 and higher, but again, no standardized system exists. So there's of course a special consideration for infill of infill zoning requirements. Overall planning initiative in Ontario are not directly towards lessening urban sprawl and encouraging infills within existing urban areas, increasing densities and better utilization of existing municipal service infrastructure. Infill areas are typically found in inner city neighborhood. Planning officials now generally favor multi-residential projects that have low profile with density height setbacks and build forms that is sensitive to the surrounding built-up areas. For example, new multi-residential low-rise rental buildings would have similar setbacks and height restrictions as originally applied to the older comparable housing stocks within the area. Selective multi-residential development may also include limited commercial, office, retail, and personal service and convenience store use, where such configuration generally aligns with existing mixed-use structures. Construction. As with office, retail, and industrial structures, all multi-residential buildings must comply with the Ontario Building Code. Apartment construction techniques and methods vary somewhat depending on the size. Smaller, low-rise walk-ups may be built with wood framing and brick veneer. Larger buildings generally follow construction methods found in the large building like cast in place, precast, or pre-delivered to job sites for installation. In recent years, a great deal more attention is focused on improving visual impact of rental properties as well as amenities offered to renters. Multi-residential structures in Ontario are gradually moving beyond the cookie cutter like structures. The I guess the next aspect to consider is drafting offers. So the couple of important items here. There's one where it regards to the tenancy information, one with regards to confidentiality, and the one with regards to notice to tenants, and one is and the last one is legislative compliance. So for the first one, the tenancy information, the agreement of purchase and sale for multi-residential building typically includes a summary of description of all leases. So, and there could be a sample scenario where there is a need for a seller representation regarding actual rents, but not the legality of rents. So, so we can have a buyer who is wanting to purchase a multi-residential building and requires information about existing folks who are renting. The clause selected provides basic details about actual rents, but is not a warranty regarding the legality of such rents pursuant to the Residential Tenancies Act. So the clause would read something like this: the seller represents and warrants to the best of seller's knowledge and belief that the current actual rents are, and it's going to list for every unit what is the current rent and what is the last increased date or amount. The parties agree that its representation and warranty shall survive and not merge on the completion of this transaction, but apply only to the circumstances existing at the completion of this transaction. The properties also agree. The parties also agree that the warranty given is as to the actual rents only and does not extend to the legality of rents. A further clause may be added if the buyer is concerned about the actual rents warranted by the seller. For example, a seller may not have the formal leases and the buyer is relying solely on the seller representation, but wants a price adjustment should the information prove incorrect. So basically, seller is seeking assurance that the actual rents are represented by the seller. The fact included in this clause is negotiable, but it's often based on the ratio of the overall purchase price and the gross rent. The parties agree that if the actual rent, including any planned increase, as declared in this agreement, is less than the rent warranted, including any planned increase by the seller, and the parties agree that the seller shall pay the buyer as liquidated damages the amount of the difference times times a factor of this as either an adjustment on the purchase price of the property or a separate payment at the sole discretion of the buyer. So to recap, there are two clauses that are important. The first clause where the seller represents warrants the rents, But again, that is no, there is no there's there's no warranty on the legality of the rent. The second is adjustment to the purchase price due to the shortfall in the rental income, where the parties agree that the actual rent, including any planned increase as declared by in the agreement, is less than the rent warranted. Then the seller shall pay to the buyer as liquidating damages the amount of difference times the factor of this of some factor as an adjustment on the purchase price of the property, or this as a separate payment at the sole discretion of the buyer. The second is the confidentiality. Negotiation will often involve the buyer's need to review supporting documentation concerning rental agreements, financial information, and other records provided by the seller. If such is the case, then seller may want assurance regarding strict confidence. So there can be a clause for the confidentiality of disclosed rental information. The buyers will hold in strict confidence any information, or rather will hold in strict confidence any knowledge about the rent review situations of the property, financial documents, leases, and such other records of the property, which the buyer obtains from this agreement or any other source, subject only to the use of such information in order to obtain professional advice and in application of an or appeal process concerning rent review. The next aspect of clauses involves notices to the tenants. Two common issues arising in the negotiation involving residential tenants. The first concern any notice of tenant rent increases subject to regulatory guidelines. Such notices may fall within the period between the offer acceptance and closing. For example, increase of rent with prior with notice prior to completion of sales. The seller should, at the earliest legally permitted time to completion, give notices of rent or increase at the statutory rate or otherwise agreed between the buyer and the seller, and provide the buyer with a proof of the proper services thereof. Notices to tenants of new owners. Upon completion, the seller shall provide the buyer with a notice of all tenants, advising them of the new owner and requiring all the future tenant rents to be paid as the buyer directs. The seller will pay to the buyer any rent paid to the seller in error or violation of the direction for a period of X months following completion, after which period the seller may refuse to accept rent from the tenant or return to them. So essentially, there are two clauses that we can talk about. The first is increase of the rent with notices prior to the completion of sale, and second is notice to a tenant of the new owner. Legislative compliance, as there are two clauses that we will discuss: rent, general warranty by the seller, and the rent by seller's warranty regarding disputes. So, like previously mentioned, Residential Tenancy Act is one of the prime legislation, and individuals cannot contract out of these statutory provisions. So the buyers may seek for confirmation of compliance as a part of the agreement. So the clause could read something like this: the seller represents the warrant to the best of seller's knowledge and belief that during the period of seller's ownership, the property has been rented in accordance with the Residential Tenancies Act, and that any rent increase has been effected in accordance with the relevant rent review legislation. The parties agree that the representation of warranty shall survive and not merge on the completion of the transaction, but only apply to the circumstances existing at the completion of this transaction. The seller representative warrant to the best of seller's knowledge and belief that there are no disputes between the seller as landlords and tenants as to the state of the lease premises, payment of rent, or contravention of applicable rent review legislation, percentage tenancies, or other material item concerning the tenants these agreements other than as specifically set out in the agreement of purchase and agreement of purchase and sale. The parties agree that these representations and warranties shall survive and not merge on the completion of this transaction, but apply only to those circumstances existing at the completion of this transaction. Multi-residential agreement of purchase and sale. A sample agreement can be found in the book, but the few of the important items to be noted in the agreement of purchase and sale for the commercial Form 500 is that the the HST is always in addition to the purchase price, and also that the title search mentions the present use. So you would probably be saying like 21 unit residential apartment building. Again, rest of the clauses are similar to the residential ones. There's a Schedule A added to the to the sample agreement of purchase and sale. That Schedule A has a bunch of conditions, like we had discussed. Again, it follows the same format as the residential ones, and the conditions could be many. For example, the buyer agrees to pay a further sum of $975,000 subject to adjustments to the seller on the completion of this transaction with the funds drawn on the lawyer's trust account in the form of a bank draft, certified check, or wire transfer using large value system. The parties to this agreement to this agreement have acknowledged and agreed that the deposit holder shall place deposit in the deposit holder's interest-bearing real estate trust account, which earns an interest at the rate of 1.9% per annum, and deposit holder shall pay any interest it earns or receives on the deposit in excess of $10 to the buyer. The parties to the agreement hereby acknowledge and agree that deposit holder shall be entitled to retain any interest earned or retained on the deposit that is $7 or less as an administrative fee. This offer is conditional on the buyer arranging and at the buyer's own expense a new first mortgage for not less than $750,000, bearing interest at the rate of not less than bearing interest at the rate of not more than 5% per annum, calculated semi-annually, not in advance, and repayable in blended monthly payments of about 5133, including both principal and interest, and to run for a term of not less than 3 years from the date of completion of this transaction. This offer is further conditional upon the buyers and buyers lawyers, accountant, consultant, structural, fire, environmental, fire, mechanical, survey, appraisal, lender, etc. conducting inspection of both the property and the due diligence documents provided by the seller, and determining that the information contained from the inspection of the property and from the document provided by the seller is equivalent and satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion, unless the buyer gives notice in writing to the seller personally or in accordance with any of the provisions of this or derived by this notice and the agreement purchase and sale or any scheduled thereto, not later than 5 p.m. on 5th of April 2020 XX, that these conditions are fulfilled. This offer shall be null and void, and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction. These conditions are included for the benefit of the buyer and may be waived at the buyer's sole option by notice in writing to the seller as affirmation within the time period stated herein. So this is a condition precedent with a waiver clause. The seller agrees to cooperate in providing access to the property for the purpose of the inspection. The buyer agrees to provide and make available to the buyer within 5 business days of acceptance offer the due diligence document required by the buyer. Such due diligence document will be included without limitation: the rent roll for the property, the copies of our tenant leases, tenancy agreement, the income and expense statement for the property, any rental increases, application to the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board, and any copies of any prior pending hearing board, a report of any capital improvements completed by the seller during the seller's ownership of the property, any existing contract for the property or equipment rental agreements for the property, copies of the property tax assessment notices, any survey in the seller's possession, and such other documents as may reasonably be requested by the buyer. Also, the conditions can be further be added, like the seller agrees to provide the buyer within 5 days of business offer an up-to-date tenant rental status report for each rental unit on the real property, confirming apartment number of bedrooms in the apartment, tenant's name, monthly rent of offers to lease, notice termination, prepaid rents, interest on the prepaid rents, parking rents if any, areas on the rent, if any, date of the latest rental increase, tenant moving date, refrigerator and stove belonging to tenant if any, other deposits if any, by tenant, inducements if any, rent-free periods if any other information that has or may have been deposited if any by the tenants. The seller represents and warrants that the information are true and accurate. Such a list is to be updated prior to the date of closing and may reflect any changeover in tenancies up to the date of closing. The seller agrees to provide the buyer with an updated tenant rental status report in the form of statutory declaration prior to the closing. Now moving on to the agriculture and farming. The term agriculture generally refers to the production of goods without through farming. No universal definition exists for the activities falling under the term farming. As per the Farm Debt Mediation Act, the the farming includes the production of field grown crops, cultivated and uncultivated, and the horticulture crops. So it's the production of field-grown crops and the horticulture crops, raising of livestock, pottery, for bearing animals, production of egg, milk, honey, maple syrup, tobacco, fiber, wood from wood lots, and fodder crops, and production of or raising of any other prescribed things or animals. The farm market typically talks about there are, in fact, there are various regulations. There are various aspects here. The commercial farm market consists of many operations, both large and small. Registrants may be involved with a large 400 acres dairy farm that involves a main drive through the 200 stall dairy barn, several additional outbuildings, or there could be like a five large tower silos with a mixer and a large feed rooms, milk parlors, robot milking and tanks listed at 6.5 million, or asked to market a small specialty farm occupying 5 acres, available for $107,000, or maybe a small house with a mixed wood lot for $207,000. Valuations in the marketplace can be challenging as these operation drives its value from many factors. Most, but not all, can be grouped under 4 criteria: location, land, building, and other assets. So, a location typically would mean a proximity to the target market, accessibility by good road, by adequate road and availability of services. However, other factors can also affect value, such as proximity to large urban areas, distinctive property features, and other rural amenities close to the property. Second consideration, land value is usually based on agricultural productivity, with soil fertility being the primary consideration. Detailed maps that are available through government agricultural services concerning soil types, soil texture, soil material, drainage, and topography. Further, the level of crop heat units is important, not only for the crop selection but also for estimating productivity, as the warm season crops have wide range of maturities. Again, with regards to the building, the type, age, and condition of the primary structures and farm equipments of an operating farm also affect the value. Prudent capital investment in modern systems and processes can directly affect the productivity, which in turn can translate into other higher values. And there could be other assets like farm quotas or government program incentive payouts, or other improvements like a large, maintained house with extensive landscaping amenities and other visual attraction features that could increase that could alter the value of the farm. So to recap, there are 4 major areas or where valuations can matter: location, land, building, and other assets. Farm quotas and the marketing board. Many agriculture products are subject to regulated markets in Ontario through marketing boards. Farm value can be significantly affected by whether or not the quota or a market contract can be assigned at the point of sale. For example, a dairy farm without a milk quota is of little value even if it has a first-class milk production facilities. Registrant should include in the agreement purchase and sale. Our farm has specific conditions providing for successful transfer or assignment from a seller to the buyer of any quota, entitlement, or contract that the buyer needs to market products from which the farm is for which the farm is being purchased. Specific marketing boards have their own transfer or assignment procedures and should be contacted directly for guidance. So again, there could be like marketing boards which are categorized into three sections. So one which does the negotiating boards. The other ones which are boards with the authority to establish price, and the boards regulating production and or marketing using quotas. So in the one which are in the boards which are just negotiating boards, these boards negotiate the minimum price paid to the producer of a specific commodity, as well as other terms associated with such as negotiating board involve the following types of commodities like seed, corn, apples, grapes, bread or soybean, tomato, seedlings, and vegetable processing. Boards with authority to establish price. These boards set the price paid to the producers, but do not have the authority to limit production. Price authority boards involve aspects as beans, fresh grapes, greenhouse, vegetables, pork, potatoes, sheep tender, and wheat. These boards establish exact quotas for each farmers in terms of what farmers can produce in market. Board established quotas include the following commodities like chickens, egg, tobacco, and turkeys. Then the negotiating boards, both with authority to establish price, and boards with regulating production and marketing using quotas. Farmland leasing. The three common land leasing agreements apply to the cropland: crop share lease, cash rent lease, and flexible cash lease. In in all three, the landlord normally supplies the land and grain storage and pays the property tax. The tenant pays the operating expenses and supplies the labor and machinery to farm the land. So let's look at the cash crop lease. In the case of a cash crop lease, the most common division is 1/3 share of all cash crops to the landlord and 2/3 of the share to the tenants. The income is often divided as the crop is sold. In the cash rent lease, the tenant receives the income from the crop sales but pays our landlord a fixed amount each year as rent. Normally, the rent is paid in advance or by one half payments in the spring before seeding in the balance in the fall after harvest of the crop. And there's a flexible cash lease where the tenant receives all the income from the crop sales, but the dollar amount paid to the landlord varies with either the price of the grain, the yield of the grain, or both. This type of lease arrangement combines some of the features of the crop share lease and the cash rent lease. Provides some flexibility in the rental rates and important when sharp swings in the grain prices occur within the marketplace. So to recap, there are the three types of lease. One is a cash crop lease, there's a cash rent lease, and a flexible cash lease. In the cash crop lease, normally 1/3 of the produce is kept by the landlord, and 2/3 goes to the tenant who is doing the farming. In the cash rent lease, there's a fixed amount of money paid to the landlord, and flexible cash lease, it's actually a combination of both, where there would be a where tenant receive all the income from the cash crop, but the dollar paid to the landlord varies with the price of the grain. In the farm lease, many issues arises that are particular to the farm situation. For example, there is a possible restriction on the crops to be grown, possible restriction on the chemicals to be applied to the land, how the land is to be left at the end of the lease, how the drainage ditches and natural water courses are to be maintained, what soil erosion practice must be used, use of any other buildings in the land for grain storage, adherence to weed control legislative provisions, whether an incoming tenant can plow the land in the fall and after harvest, whether the tenant can remove the crop of the land the following spring after the termination of the lease. In the crop share lease agreement, additional matters should also be considered. Who will make the cropping decision? Who will make the cropping decision? Who will determine the amount of crop input to apply, and how these costs shall be shared? And the extent of crop insurance, who will receive any government payments or subsidies, and who is responsible for the sale of the grains. The next item is the zoning. The zoning of land for agricultural purposes is fundamental to most zoning provisions in southern Ontario. Such zoning generally seeks out to protect agricultural regions within the region by preventing farmlands from being converted to non-farm uses and preventing other intrusions from non-farm interests onto established rural agricultural areas. In reality, this rural insistence on minimal intrusion is consistent with the overall zoning principles in cities. For example, provisions in our residential areas that protect against intrusion by commercial or industrial users. The definition of agricultural use and the permitted uses under zoning provisions will vary by the municipality, but generally refers to the use of land with or without ancillary building involving tillage of soil, growing and harvesting vegetables, field crops, tender fruits, and other cash crops, dairy operations, and breeding, grazing, boarding, and training of all kind of livestock. The definition also typically includes provisions for building or structures involving manufacturing, processing, servicing, establishments that support agriculture uses. They would normally involve farm machinery and equipment sales and repairs, seed, grain, feed, and forage processing facilities. Provincial legislation. The accelerated migration of urban dwellers to rural parts of the province has, in some cases, created a conflict between those who farm for a living and those who use the property for purely residential purposes. This has resulted in the complaints regarding noise, odor, and dust arising from the farm operations. The Farming and Food Protection Act give farmers protection from nuisance complaints and subsequent lawsuits or injunction. The FFPPA also ensures that the farming and food industry is protected from restrictive municipal bylaws that could constrain normal farm practices. Further, urban tradition in agricultural areas has caused considerable concerns among city planners, among the planners, particularly those involved in agricultural land adjacent to the GTA or Golden Horseshoe. Many factors come into play, including reduction in the total farm arable land, high land prices due to urban speculation, and dwindling agricultural services due to the loss of agricultural support services. Construction: the farm building construction, normally generally regulated under the Ontario Building Code, involves building for housing, stocks, and equipment, as well as other structures used in the production, storage, and processing of agricultural products. The Ontario Building Code also permits farm building construction in Ontario to be regulated by National Farm Building Code of Canada. Standards differ to some degree between these two codes, and such matters go beyond the discussions here. As with residential and commercial structures, the building department of the applicable municipality issues building permits for farm structures. Prospective buyers contemplating the new farm building can avail themselves of the expertise of the Canadian Plant Service, or CPS. The CPS is a Canada-wide network of agriculture engineers and livestock specialists focusing on planning, designing, and construction of modern farm buildings. Whether or not engineered plans are required depends on the size and the complexity of the building project. Also, the plans may need to be address unusual circumstances, like design elements such as a large span beyond a normal farm building practice. Further, officials will usually require engineer drawings to ensure that structural designs properly address anticipated load. A site investigation may be necessary to address soil conditions for heavy structures such as tower silo. Zoning bylaws will set out minimum building setbacks requirement. Farm buildings used in the livestock buildings and manure storage warrant special mention. Two minimum distance criteria are available. One is a minimum distance separation, MDS1. Then is MDS2, minimum distance separation, MDS2. The MDS1 is the minimum distance required between new development and existing livestock facilities and manure storage. And MDS2 is the minimum distance sufficient distance required between new and or developing or expanding livestock or manure storage facilities and the property boundary houses, recreation areas, and other land uses. MDS2 calculations are enforced by the municipality, and compliance is required in order to obtain a building permit for any new or expanded livestock or manure storage facilities. So, and MDS1 calculations are part of the nutrient management strategy under the Nutrient Management Act. So to recap, there are two separation distance. One is MDS1, which is used by the Nutrient Management Act, and MDS2 is used by the municipality, and compliance is required to obtain a building permit. So to elaborate more on the Nutrient Management Act, the Nutrient Management Act requires that any building project relating to livestock housing or manure facility must have approved nutrient management strategy for building permit will be issued. This applies to all farms that generate more than 5 nutrient unit and are proposing to build, expand, or renovate. A nutrient unit is a calculation based on the number or type of livestock being housed. For example, 150 bird will correspond to 1 nutrient unit, and therefore a pottery operation with 4,500 birds would have a 30 nutrient unit. The Nudity Management Act, in addition to the minimum distance requirement for livestock or unmanaged storage, structure also addresses storage, handling, and use and transportation of chemical fertilizers, of commercial fertilizers, requirement to develop, document, and retain records, and leading to nutrient management plans and strategies, required qualification for farmers, others applying such materials, establishment of minimum distance requirements regarding land applications to protect adjacent lands or watershed resources. Other agriculture farming issues. Registrants may encounter various unique circumstances involving commercial farming operations. Selected topics are included for illustrative purposes, but those with individual focusing their effort on farming should pursue advanced education courses to further their careers. Tile drainage. Commercial farming operations may be involved with the installation of underground drainage system, either tile or pipe or tubing, which can improve productivity of agricultural land. This removes the excess water from the crop roots, thereby heightening crop yields and overall farming efficiency. Farmers can be eligible for a tile loan under the Tile Drainage Act, subject to the approval by the local municipality. The work must be completed by a licensed drainage contractor. A complete certificate is prepared, as well as and each year thousands of agricultural drainages are installed. So again, coming back to recap the other agriculture farming issues. One is the tile drainage, soil testing. I'm sorry, tile drainage, dams, drains and diversions, soil testing, farm taxations, and farm financing and business business services. So looking at the tile drainage first, there's a Tile Drainage Act with the farmers eligible for a loan. The loan program subject to the approval of the municipalities. The work must be completed by the licensed drainage contractors, and the completion certificate is provided. And tile drainage record is kept, which says the location, spacing, direction, and depth of the tile bed. And drainage record is organized into geospatial tile drainage database to consolidate existing drain information. Dams, drain and diversions. Large farm operations may undertake certain water-related projects, including construction of dams, general drainage, diversions, and similar projects like channelization in stream ponds or bypass ponds, which fall under the Lake and River Improvement Act. This act gives the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry a mandate to manage various water-related activities, particularly in areas beyond the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority and where statutory compliance is necessary. The Act also sets out approval required based on the land ownership, whether it's a crown land, municipality, or private. A property owner, when contemplating the building of a dam drainage system, should contact M&R for guidance whether or not a building permit is required, or information concerning environmentally appropriate practices and procedures. Soil testing. A soil test is used to determine what specific amount and type of fertilizer should be applied, and for the best crop production. Laboratories may also use other methods to assess the needs, such as the plant analysis and nutrient deficiency determination in the crop leaves. Soil testing facilities for farming operation are available through various laboratories. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs has an accreditation program to ensure testing procedures are highly accurate. And again, the success of any soil testing depends on the number of samples, the correct depth of sampling, and sampling patterns used for the field and the areas being sampled. Farm taxation. Registrants should be generally aware of the taxation issues to assist in the listing and selling of farm property. For example, Ontario farmers receive 75% reduction in tax reduction for municipal taxes based on the current residential property class if the property is assessed and valued as farmland by municipal property access corporation. So again, this is a good amount of tax reduction, but the condition attached to it, if they carry on the farming business generating a predetermined level of gross income, and they are Canadian citizens or permanent residents, have a valid farm business registration number under the Farm Registration and Farm Organization Funding Act, which the registration must be completed by September 1 of the year prior to the taxation year, and must submit a appropriate application manually. The residential property class will be applied to home and 1 acre of surrounding farmland. The farmland property will apply to other farmland use and buildings, and if above criteria are met. So to recap, there is a 70% reduction in the municipal tax if the land is classified as it's farmland as per the impact. The residential property class will be applied to the home and 1 acre of surrounding farm property. The farmland property class will apply to the other farmland use and buildings if the above criteria are met. Assuming that the property and the buyer qualify, then if the sale closes after September 1, the buyer may lose the benefit of the reduced tax rate. The reassessment will be made for the balance of the current year at the full rate, representing a dynamic increase for the period. For the next tax year, the buyer has until October 31st of that year to apply for an informal request for reconsideration to the administrator of the farmland class. If the sale closes before September 1, the buyer can register prior to the deadline, obtain a substantial increase in the next year will be paid unless an appropriate formal request is successful. Sale of a farmland. For income tax purposes, the farmland is treated no differently than any other improved real property at the point of sale, and any capital gain tax is subject. And any capital gain is subject to tax on the percentage of the capital gain, including in the seller's income, 50%. However, there are two provisions in the Income Tax Act allow for a tax-free sale of the farm property. The first is when the sale is to an individual, sale by an individual to an individual's child, as long as the property involved is qualifying farm property. The second is $75,000 capital gain exclusion available to exempt all a portion of the capital gain realized on qualified farm property, regardless of who the buyer is. This exemption also applies to qualify shares of family farm corporation and interest in family farm partnership. Treatment of farm property varies depending on when the property was acquired. A test of how long that the property must have been used in farming is different for property owned prior to 1987 than those property acquired for 1987. Farm financing business services. Registrants may have buyers inquiring about farm financing and business related services provided to the farmers. There is a Farm Credit Corporation, which is a federal crown corporation established in 1959 and overseen by the Ministry of Agriculture and Agri-Food. The Farm Credit Act passed in 2001 significantly expanded FCC role by offering various financial products and business services to farmers and agri-businesses associated with farming. Drafting offers a sample agreement is there again it's pretty much similar to a normal commercial agreement, but a couple of areas is HST is again additional. The present use is dairy farm, and there are a bunch of clauses. So the conditions could be the buyer agrees to pay for the sum of 1,575,000, subject to the adjustment to the seller on the completion of the transaction, with the funds drawn on the law trust account in the form of bank draft, certified check, or wire transfer. The parties to the agreement have acknowledged and agreed that the deposit holder shall place the deposit in the deposit holder's interest-bearing real estate trust account. The seller agreed to place the warrant to the best of knowledge and belief that subject property has never contained uniform form insulation, or has been used as a disposal of waste, or there are known pollutants or contaminants within the meaning of the Environment Protection Act deposited in or contained on the property, accepting the various permitted chemicals used in connection with farming business operation, accepted in accordance with agricultural practices. The seller agrees to provide the buyer upon request all documents, records, reports related matters in the seller's possession. The seller further authorizes any and all federal, environmental and municipal authorities and the technical standard and safety authority to release to the buyer's lawyer or agent any or all information related to the environmental matters that may be on that may be on record with respect to the state property. The seller agrees to pay a prior to completion all tile drainage loans and municipal assessments affecting the property, accepting accepting the assessment for improvements made after the date of completion of this offer. And again, there could be more details, like the buyers are acknowledged that the valuation breakdown of the assets for this transaction is: land is 800k, residence 200k, barns and shed 400k, silos, bunkers and grains to 105k, fixed equipment 100k, total for all assets is 1.625 million. Now moving on to the next important aspect is the recreational. The recreation market in Ontario covers a broad array of properties, typically including second homes, cottages, lodges, small and mixed-use resort properties. The small recreational business. The small recreation business thrives throughout Ontario. The small recreation business can involve a lakeside property consisting of a rural residential home with separate winterized cottage, including docks, boat launches, beach areas, and seasonal houseboat business, complete with primary residence, office complex, repair facilities, houseboat trailer for launching and lakeside docking, and a trailer park with waterside convenience store and dock and a gas dock for seasonal cottage and boat storage. The small vacation business category also expands to ancillary services beyond accommodation. They can be wilderness camps, there's bed and breakfast accommodation, and also there can be ski chattels or small lodges. Regarding the hotels, motels, and resorts, the vacationing public is faced with a bewildering array of hotels, lodges, and resorts. At one end of the spectrum, the traditional hotel configuration servicing vineyards travelers may attract the vacationing public given its prime location. What is important is the market analysis. Lodging demand is gauged by the rooms occupied or the occupancy level. Many subcategories of accommodation are analyzed given different market areas and travelers' preferences. Hotel, lodges, resort typically rely on the market analysis to assess the supply and demand factors. Such research may be focused on local, regional, national, and international statistics, or a specialty market within one or more of these categories. This data is often combined with qualitative information gained through market research regarding traveling preferences for specific type of accommodation amenities. On the supply side, the specialty marketing companies provide research regarding number of rooms within defined market. Owners and operators of hotels and other similar accommodation can avail themselves of sophisticated market analysis tools to assess specific property performance in relation to the competition and adjust strategies accordingly. Data is also available regarding business sources. Hotels and motels. Hotel is broadly defined as a building in which temporary lodging is provided and may include meals and other services. A motel is a hotel in which parking is provided near the room and may include door access directly from the room to the parking area. A boutique hotel sector is grown in stature both from within urban and recreational marketplaces. Lodges and resort consist of main inn, completely complemented with cottages or cabins. Lodges are typically associated with rustic accommodation, while resorts are all inclusive accommodation providing various forms of recreation and entertainment. However, differentiation between the two is often blurred. A five-star lodge versus a two-star rustic resort. To compound matters, the term resort means different things to different people. Large recreation hotels and motels, the size and complexity of the international resorts has grown dramatically in terms of recreation or vacationing, housing choices, and services or facilities provided to residents and visitors. Four-season investment opportunities. There can be hotel condominiums and multi-use resorts. Again, with regards to planning and zoning, recreation planning and zoning consideration vary significantly depending on the size, nature, and of the commercial recreational activity. Registrants involved with such property should have detailed knowledge of the specific zoning requirements and other planning consideration. As a general guideline, Those parts of Ontario focused on tourism are generally positively disposed towards expansion of recreational operations. Bed and breakfast requirements. Municipal regulation regarding bed and breakfast operations and small county inns vary by municipality, but generally become increasingly stringent in addition to requiring current operating license. Typically renewed every year for a fee, bed and breakfast operations may be subject to various B&B bylaw requirements. Must prepare both the floor plan and site plan outlining location of the building, location size of the required parking spaces, and location of any amenity area in order to be licensed. Must ensure that the total occupancy and length of the stay by any such occupant conform to the operating license requirement. It cannot typically operate in combination with any type of accommodation. Bed and breakfast solution combined with the hotel operation cannot offer services beyond specified in the operating license. Provide breakfast only and not other meals. Maintain maintain a daily register of guests and erect a sign that complies fully with the applicable municipal bylaw. Waterfront development restrictions. Commercial uses involve waterfront areas. Resort lodge must comply with lot size and frontage requirements noted in the municipal bylaw. Exemplifying the popularity of large recreation resorts have been mainstay of the tourist industry in Ontario and Canada for decades. Older lodges dating back near a century are being updated, expanded to include housing options, recreation and community-based facilities, and limited commercial retail and similar services. Vacant land development. Vacant land as a commercial market sector is focused on development activities involving planning, application, and development processes. The land technically refers to raw acreage, raw land, or vacant land, or improved land, because no alteration for specific purpose has occurred. The planning process is a overriding legislative framework for land development in Ontario. Beyond the local statute, the scope of regulatory and related requirements is a complex interplay of provincial statutes. So, in terms of land development application, the developers are commonly involved in the municipal application for official plans. So, there's a Planning Act restriction regarding uncontrolled development, adherence to provincial policies, availability of adequate servicing, and public inputs. They can also be zoning bylaws. And Ontario Municipal Board is a quasi-judicial body which hears applications and appeals regarding, and the the important aspect here is the land development application. There can be an amendment application, negotiation between the municipalities and the landowner, and an amendment requires an official plan and zoning bylaw. There will be pre-consultation meeting. Applications contains appropriate drafting and fee, and preliminary site plan development will require. Of course, there's a bunch of requirements and the studies and signage. And other submissions, and also there's a this for amending approvals. Land development agreement requires as a condition for amending application approvals, rezoning of property. And it's not a part of rezoning process, but negotiated between parties before or coincident to that agreement. Land development agreement is contractual. They're different from statutory, like the subdivision agreement or site plan control agreement under the Planning Act. Typically, municipalities require land development agreement terms prior to rezoning approval. Also includes financial prepayment arrangement and the bank guarantee, like the letter of credit from a chartered bank. Landowner pays the local improvement and development charges that relate to the specific land. I think with this we are done with chapter 3, multi-residential farm and recreation and land development. Thanks.